The God with a Needle. The house in Tigre sat quiet behind its gates, the kind of quiet that felt wrong for a man who had spent 40 years surrounded by noise. Diego Armando Maradona, the boy from Villa Fiorito who had become, by some measures, the greatest footballer who ever lived, lay in a rented bedroom 2 weeks removed from brain surgery. No stadium lights. No 80,000 voices chanting his name. Just a monitor, a nurse somewhere down the hall, and a silence that would not break until it was too late. On the morning of November 25, 2020, that silence became permanent. He was 60 years old. He had survived a World Cup, a 15-month doping ban, a public collapse on live television in 1994, and decades of an addiction that had chased him since he was young enough that his body should have shrugged it off. He did not survive the 2 weeks after his surgery. And according to the court records that would later try to explain why, he may not have needed to die at all. To understand how it happened, the story has to go back 35 years, to Naples, where a 19-year-old prodigy first discovered that fame could be as corrosive as it was intoxicating. Cocaine entered his life in the mid-1980s, reportedly introduced through the nightlife circles that orbited him, men who treated him less like a person and more like an asset to be managed, protected, and quietly exploited. By 1991, Italian authorities had caught him, and he served a 15-month ban. By 1994, at the World Cup in the United States, he tested positive again and was sent home in disgrace in front of the entire world. He spoke about the addiction himself, many times, in interviews across the years, admitting, in his own words on record, that cocaine had very nearly ended him more than once, that he considered himself lucky to be alive at all after everything his body had endured. It was never a secret. It was, instead, something the world watched happen to him in real time, decade after decade, and did remarkably little to stop. The chemistry explains why his heart gave out when it did. Cocaine floods the brain's reward pathways by blocking the reuptake of dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin, which is what produces the euphoria addicts chase. But the same mechanism batters the cardiovascular system. It triggers a surge of stress hormones that spike heart rate and blood pressure simultaneously, while constricting the very coronary arteries responsible for feeding the heart its oxygen. Repeated over years, this process thickens the heart wall, scars the muscle, and accelerates the hardening of the arteries. Layer in decades of heavy alcohol use, which weakens the heart independently through cardiomyopathy, and what remains by age 60 is a cardiovascular system with almost no reserve left to draw on. Medical experts who later reviewed his case for Argentine prosecutors testified that his heart showed exactly this pattern: enlarged, weakened, and dangerously unprepared for additional strain. Brain surgery, even a successful one, is exactly that kind of strain. It was after that surgery, an operation to remove a subdural hematoma, a blood clot pressing on his brain, that the balance of power in Diego Maradona's life quietly shifted for the last time. Rather than recovering in a hospital, under specialized monitoring, he was discharged into home care at the rented house in Tigre. Prosecutors would later allege that this decision was made while he was not, in their words, in full possession of his mental faculties, that he was not capable of meaningfully consenting to leave professional care behind. The man who had once decided the outcome of a World Cup with his own 2 feet no longer had control over the room he was dying in. That control belonged now to a small circle of doctors, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and nurses, 7 people who would eventually be charged with homicide by negligence, facing as much as 25 years in prison, a charge every one of them has denied. Forensic pathologists who conducted his autopsy told the court, years later, something almost unbearable, that Maradona did not die suddenly. He suffered, they testified, for as long as 12 hours before death came, showing signs of distress that, in their expert opinion, should have been caught and treated long before it was fatal. An independent panel of 20 medical specialists convened by Argentina's public prosecutor reached the same conclusion: with adequate care, in an adequate facility, Diego Maradona would likely still be alive. He suffered in agony for hours, one of the forensic experts told the court, describing the findings of the autopsy, a detail that would define the case for the public far more than any legal technicality could. The legal reckoning has been its own kind of chaos. The original trial, which opened in March 2025, collapsed months later in a mistrial after it emerged that one of the presiding judges had secretly been involved in producing a documentary about the very case she was supposed to be deciding, a scandal so extraordinary it led to her impeachment and forced the entire process to begin again from zero. A new panel of judges picked the case back up, still unresolved, still contested, the defendants still maintaining their innocence. It is tempting to tell this as a simple story about drugs destroying a genius. It isn't that simple, and it was never only that. Diego Maradona's addiction did not begin because he lacked discipline. It began inside a system that handed a teenager global fame with no infrastructure to survive it, and it very possibly ended because that same pattern repeated itself one final time, a 60-year-old man's last days entrusted to caregivers who, according to the very court built to judge them, failed the most basic duty medicine has, to keep the patient alive. He conquered football with his own 2 feet, in front of the whole world, more completely than almost anyone in the sport's history. In the end, what he needed most, competent, attentive, honest care in a room nobody was watching closely enough, was the one thing the record suggests he never received. The hand of God could not save the hand that shook.